Okay, tips for responses. Answer the question. Demonstrate value to your client. Make it easy for them to find the answers. Consequently, the idea of tables so they can find your answers is really valuable. The other way to show them, to make it easy for them to find your answers is by having their question in a different colour to your answers. Blue and black works well. I wouldn't use light colours like green or anything like that because that's hard to read. But blue and black works quite well because they are slightly different. Grey, a half-strength grey to black works very well as well. Write with a happy professional tone and one voice. So what that means is if you're feeling the pain of tendering and just it's hard work and you're thinking it's hard work and you can't wait to finish it and all this sort of stuff, that's going to come through into your tender. So think about the kids coming to you going, wow, this is really exciting. Use that sort of energy while you're writing your tender response. One voice, if there's more than one of you in a company writing information for a particular tender, always have one person that's going to go through and edit it and turn it into the way they write or in one way. There's nothing worse than having half an answer in the past tense and the other half of an answer in the present tense. It's confusing. Focus on the client's benefits, their objectives, their requirements. Limit the use of acronyms and industry speak or industry jargon. The least amount of jargon you use, depending on your client, the better off you're going to be. Sometimes there's clauses within a tender that are for information only. Now, it's well worth putting in a response to an information only clause. And something worth jotting down is read and understood, or understood and agreed. Because then they know that you have read it, you have understood it, or you've agreed to it, and they can just move on. You haven't left a question blank. Search and replace and copy and paste pitfalls. When you use copy and paste, whilst it seems like a good idea at the time, if you're copying from a previous tender response, chances are you've used the previous tender response company name in your words. Now, if ever you send out a tender response with a different company name in, how does that make you look? Yeah, leaving in someone else's company name or address or something along those lines is just bad form. As simple as that. It's just not showing your attention to detail at all. I once worked for a company that some other people were working on a document, on a capability document, and they decided to replace the word business with, no, sorry, not business, the word company with another client's company name. So they did a search and replace company for ABC company. Seemed like a good idea at the time. However, the word company throughout the entire document was a lot more than just a company name. It was ABC group of companies, and there's all these other connotations for the word company. So they ended up having a sentence, something along the lines of, we provide services for ABC's company, and a whole heap of other information. Now, I looked at this and just went, search and replace. That's the problem. So if you're ever going to use search and replace, be very specific about what you're searching and replacing, and also read through it afterwards. If you haven't got someone to review a tender submission for you, stand up, or sit down, stand up and read word for word out loud what you've written. Now, I know some of you are just going, say what? That's going to take me hours. However, it will pick up grammar, it will pick up spelling mistakes, it will pick up sentences that don't ever finish, it will pick up areas of a response that you may have done a search and replace that you shouldn't have. It'll pick up so many issues that you don't want to go to your clients. Having someone read it who is non-technical, who maybe doesn't know your company as well as you do, is perfect, because especially if they ask questions about what you've written. If they're reading it and they don't understand it, absolutely, the client won't understand it either. That's where people like myself come into it as well. We don't know your business. However, we read everything, and if we don't understand what you're telling us after we've spoken to you, then your client's not going to understand either. Tips for reviewers. Always get someone to review the response. Just following on from what you said, how will someone read the response if they know nothing about your company? Don't assume anything. Don't assume that the person reading your response actually understands what you're telling them. Are the answers easy to read, or are they confusing and fluffy? You know, if your reviewer has to read a paragraph 4 times before they understand it, then it's probably confusing and fluffy. Is the response set up how the client wants it? So in some tenders, in a lot of tenders, they'll say, this is how we want you to respond. We want section A first, section B second, etc. Make sure you follow whatever they say. Don't say, refer to document X, refer to document X, because they won't. Make sure you've spelt the client name right. Be surprised how many people don't. And eliminate any credibility killers. So a credibility killer could be a wrong spec. It could be you've meant compliant and you've said non-compliant in one area, but then in a different area of the tender you've said compliant. You know, there's different, when everything doesn't gel within your responses and say the same things, the credibility killers will come back and bite you. Okay, commercial and pricing tips. Now, there are some industries that some of these do not relate. I will say that. Are you putting up a win-win or a lose-lose? Don't ever rely on the bill of materials. Also have a look in the scope and the contract. So if someone comes to you and says, "Oh, just give us a price based on this bill of materials," be very wary, because there could be things in the contract and in the scope that are not in the bill of materials that you really need to know about. There's ways to present pricing. The clients ask for something specific, their requirements. If you go in with least cost compliant, and what that means is if they've asked for a glass with a quarter filled with water, that's what you price. Then you put in options. If you would like it half filled with water, here's a price. If you would like it fully filled with water, there's a price. So even though you know they could do with all these other areas within their tender, don't price it in your initial in your initial price. Have it as an option. Think of, would you like fries with that? Okay? Okay, risk mitigation strategy. The clearer you show your value to your clients in their eyes, the less price is a factor. The caveat there is there are some industries where some parts of the industry it's always price, and I understand that. But most is on value. Document all assumptions, inclusions and exclusions. Okay, so it's a way of being able to say all of our pricing is based on the site is open between 9 and 5. You've now made it that the site's only open between 2 and 5, so therefore the way we need to deliver services means that we need to have more people on deck at any point in time, and they can't actually do what they're going to do because they're all falling over each other because of the shortened time. So the price needs to change. So the legal implication, before the contract is signed, all assumptions should be tested and verified either way. So don't sign any contracts until every assumption is sorted.
All right, good.
Okay? Okay, so contract terms specified. So when you're submitting a price, always say how long that price is valid for. It's a very easy thing to put in. Most companies don't put it in though. Because what could happen is you'll submit a price today, and if you don't have a clause saying how long it's valid till, they could come to you in 10 years' time and say, we now want you to do it for this price. Now in 10 years' time, the chances of the price being the same is pretty remote. Okay? Okay, checklist. Page 43. Have they sent out any addendums to the tender? Have you taken notice of those addendums? This is the checklist that earlier I was discussing the day before. I'll go through the checklist again and just make sure everything's done. I'll reread the tender again, make sure everything's done, just as that final sanity check. Now, I've probably read the tender 5 times since it's been done before that, to be clear. Final checklist, make sure you've read every addendum, that you've covered every addendum off. Spelling and grammar. Do another spell check. You can't do enough spell checks, grammar checks. Make sure, yes, clear, succinct messages. All questions are answered with what's in it for me, as in for your client, not for you. All responses follow the tendering rules. So if they've said you can respond to this particular question and you can only do it in under half a page, make sure it's under half a page. One voice. Make sure everything's in the right tense, especially. Use the client terminology. Do searches for things like GPO, cell phone, things like that. Make sure that everything's in the right terminology. Make sure that your compliance or your departures from the contract are clearly stated, or your departures from the requirements. And the final part of the checklist, submission on time.